Thank you, Speaker, and I want to thank each of you from both sides of the aisle for the opportunity to speak here today. This is actually a very special privilege for me. As some of you may know, I spent 9 years in the Florida State House, including 2 as Speaker, so I feel real comfortable up here. And that many of my best memories in public service happened in that time. I don't think there's perhaps no better example of what our founders intended our democracy to look like than right here in this chamber. Before me sits the largest state legislature in the country, which means each of you represent literally just a few thousand people. Many of these people you know not from campaigning, you know them from childhood, from the checkout line at the grocery store, from church or from school board meetings. You live and work and spend most of your time with them, not with each other. Your experiences out there shape your work in here. That's why the New Hampshire House is truly a citizen legislature. It is truly the people's house. The closer the government is to the people, the better our founders knew it would work. I think this is an idea embodied in the traditional New Hampshire town hall meeting, which of course I've had a chance to participate in throughout this campaign. It's important to remember how rare this variety of democracy is. The idea that people can govern their own affairs at the citizen level. This idea is just a few centuries old. But most who have ever lived have had their affairs dictated to them by leaders they didn't even choose. Leaders who were far removed from the problems they faced every day. It's also important to remember that this system is fragile. That power has a tendency to coalesce, to centralize, and then to expand. It requires a conscious effort to keep the scales of power balanced between, for example, Washington and our states. And when those efforts fail, the impact hits chambers like this, even before it hits our own people. In the Florida House, we felt the growing power of Washington every day, the way it forced its way into more and more of our decisions, the way Washington passed down mandates and made us spend time dealing with what it wanted us to deal with, rather than what Floridians wanted. Washington's growth in stature and size has been the fault of both parties and of more than one president. But it is a simple truth that the rate of growth has increased under our current president. This isn't the place to list every shortcoming of this administration. I'd need more than 15 minutes for that anyway. But I would be remiss if I'd failed to mention that we are gathered here today on the 7th anniversary of President Obama's inauguration. And this provides an opportunity to pause and take stock of the change this president promised and delivered. Now we know, and I believe, that Barack Obama is not a bad person. But it is my belief that he misunderstands our country. He views our federal government as a tool not to protect our rights, but as a tool to compel certain outcomes that he deems fair and just, to control our economy, our health care, decisions about even the weather. His intentions may have been good, but the impact of his presidency hasn't been. Part of the reason is that Washington is too far removed from the people that it serves. The bigger it grows, the more power is siphoned away from state and local leaders like you and placed in the hands of unelected bureaucrats. Common Core is a perfect example. As Speaker, I was proud to modernize Florida's curriculum from the bottom up by working with parents, and teachers, and school board members. Local leaders like you are always better suited to this task than DC bureaucrats, in part because you are more accountable. If you don't believe me, try getting one of those bureaucrats on the phone. DC is also motivated too often by the wrong things. While your work in this chamber is a public service for which you're only paid $100 a year, government has become an industry in Washington, and that industry is booming. 13 of the richest counties in America form a circle around Washington, D.C. Well, how can we expect that city's politicians and lobbyists and special interests to understand better than you, for example, how opiate abuse is impacting your state, or what a struggling family in Nashua is up against, or what a child in Merrimack needs to succeed, or what will help a single mom in Guilford rise from her circumstances. Calls for a limited federal government are not calls for a heartless government. They are an acknowledgement that while Americans deserve a government attuned to their needs and sensitive to their concerns, Washington is simply not the best place to find it. For when our politics takes place far away, politics becomes impersonal. And when it becomes impersonal, the answer to every problem becomes the same: to raise a tax or create a new one-size-fits-all federal program. These things make government bigger, but they do not make it better. More active, but not more effective. I know, because I've witnessed it firsthand in Congress. But on the state level, innovative ideas are informed by local experiences, adjusted to unique regional needs, and as a result, the effect of your service can be positive and profound. Once again, I know, because I've seen it. Before I became the Speaker of the Florida House, I held what I called idea raisers throughout Florida. I sought input from Floridians on what a limited but effective state government could do to make their life better and easier. And then we compiled a book called 100 Innovative Ideas for Florida's Future. And eventually, many of these ideas that came from our people became law. I felt the joy of extending to autistic children the special care and attention they need. I saw the brighter futures we built for our most impoverished neighborhoods through programs like the Miami Children's Initiative in Liberty City. And I witnessed a tangible sense of relief when I passed a law that protected families and businesses from having their property seized through eminent domain. Washington quantifies its successes through statistics and through dollar amounts. But you feel your successes in your neighbors' lives, in your child's school, in your household budget. That is why, as president, rather than telling state leaders like you to place your faith in Washington, as president, I will tell Washington to place its faith in you. I will trust you to choose the curriculum and education standards that are right for your children, because I know you will work with parents and local schools to do so. I will trust you with our nation's anti-poverty funds, so that whether it's an emphasis on higher education your constituents need, or substance abuse treatment, or targeted job training, you can direct the funds to the specific needs of your community. I will trust you with New Hampshire's energy future, because it is you, not faraway bureaucrats, who know how best to balance your local means of transmission and production with environmental concerns. As president, I will take my oath to uphold the Constitution seriously, including the 10th Amendment, which says that every power not specifically given to the federal government, it belongs to the states, to you. And by the way, that just so happens to be most powers. I will recognize that no one, myself included, knows the needs of New Hampshire better than the people of New Hampshire. Of course, the real brilliance of state government, what sets it apart from Washington, doesn't come from this chamber or even this city. It actually comes from the people you represent. I would argue, in part, because of the size of this body, that every single person in this state, no matter what they've been through, could find at least one person in this chamber who has been through similar trials and can connect personally with their struggles. This is what makes your representative body so strong. But as someone who has been in a position like yours, allow me to offer a word of encouragement, because some days your challenges here will leave you feeling stretched thin, unable to balance legislative duties with your career and family. I know what this is like, because I also know how these struggles hold value. Back in 2001, I went through a difficult time. I had recently been named Majority Whip, which made it tougher to give adequate attention to my job outside of the legislature. I knew that eventually I'd either lose that job or I'd see a significant reduction in my salary because of it. And either one of those outcomes would have been a disaster for my family. My salary at the time was higher than most people, and yet it barely covered our basic expenses. My wife, Jeanette, and I had a new daughter, and like many families then and now, we felt like we were drowning under our bills. My student loan payments were close to $900 a month. My rent was $1,500 a month. Car payments were another few hundred. Eventually, we chose to sell a car, and we moved in with Jeanette's mother for a time. So I hired a headhunter to help me find a job better suited to my schedule. But I kept coming up empty. After all, who wants to hire someone that's going to be gone 3 to 6 months a year in the state legislature? But my understanding wife, who had already sacrificed so much to help me serve in office, now had to worry about my ability to provide for my family. And so I began to fear and almost accept that the only solution was to resign from the legislature and dedicate myself to the full-time practice of law again. I know many of you understand these pressures, these doubts. In my case, I knew my struggles were small compared to those of so many of my neighbors, and compared to the struggles my own parents had faced years before. But what I found is that these struggles brought for me into sharp focus what public service was truly all about. They heightened my desire to find new solutions to the old challenges facing so many families, at that time including my own. So I'll never forget that one day in the midst of these challenges when I got in the car and I started driving just to clear my head. And I found myself pulling up to the church where Jeanette and I had gotten married just a few years before. I walked in, I went down to the front pew, and I opened the kneeler and I began to pray. And I asked God what He wanted me to do, what He wanted me to learn. I prayed His will would be done, and I prayed for the strength to accept whatever that will would be. Well, by the time I left that church, I was still worried, but I'd resigned to accept whatever happened. And then on my way back to my mother-in-law's house, my cell phone rang. After weeks without hearing anything, the headhunter was calling to tell me that there was a law firm that had expressed interest in my services. A door had suddenly opened and presented a way out of my predicament. So as I look back, I see those and other periods of struggle not as a distraction from my service. I see them as a part of my service. They helped inform the work I did. The work I did on behalf of recent college graduates languishing under student debt, or the young parent living paycheck to paycheck, or the moms and dads struggling to balance work and the desire to be home with their kids. And so, fellow Americans, I know you are all here for a common reason. It is the same reason I am here. You have felt the call to serve, to help others access opportunities and achieve their potential. One of the best ways to do so is to continue to be out among them. And when you fall on times of hardship, as we all do, don't let those experiences drive you away from this place. Instead, bring those experiences back here to contribute to the collective wisdom of this body, a wisdom that is uniquely fit for the people that you serve. For more than 2 centuries, legislatures like these and leaders like you, they have helped set our country, the United States of America, apart. The true roots of our democracy are here, in all of you who are called to this place out of duty, not out of ambition, to do something, not to be someone. One of the questions before us in this election is, will you be able to continue your vital work? Or will your influence be transferred to another place, handed over to some anonymous face in Washington who may have never stepped foot in this state and has no appreciation for how unique it is? Over the past year, I have had the honor of meeting so many of your friends and neighbors and colleagues throughout the state of New Hampshire. One truth I know is that independence runs in your veins. Live free or die, that call to action inspires and echoes through the generations. If Washington encroaches on our states, we will forfeit much of what makes us different and special and unique from all the nations on the earth. But I want you to know something. Despite everything going wrong in our country today, I believe with all my heart that God is not done with America yet. I believe with all my heart that God still destines us for an even better future and for the opportunity to extend the hope of a better life to more people than ever before. Together we can create that better future for America. You and me and all those around this country who believe our people are still the source of our native strength, more than capable of governing their own affairs. And so in closing, I would just ask you to pray. Not for me, although that would help, but pray for this body. Pray for the person to your left and to your right. Pray for the person across the aisle. And pray for those you represent. And most of all, pray for our country. Pray that our next president will have the wisdom to place Washington's faith in our people. And pray that God will give each of us in public life the wisdom to uplift, to serve, and to save the American dream. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much.